The restaurant's main screen flashed Table 7 wants their meat rare, Sophia. But as she approached, she saw Emperor Theron Goldwing cradling his disabled hatchling Orion. When Sophia instinctively reached out to stabilize the struggling dragonette, the entire room fell silent. Dragon businessmen whispered about disgrace, but Theron's eyes held something different, shock then dawning curiosity. What happened next would redefine interspecies relations forever. Each morning began with the same ritual, checking her mother's breathing before the first shift. Sophia Reeves balanced two worlds on her shoulders, the clatter of restaurant service and the quiet hum of medical equipment. Her nursing uniform stayed folded in a drawer. Unused since the hospital cuts began, she wore server's black instead, the fabric still carrying last night's scent of spiced dragon meat and polished scales. The restaurant stood as neutral territory where humans and dragons maintained careful distance. Sophia moved through the dining room with practiced precision, her tray always steady, her smile never reaching her eyes. She knew which dragon patrons preferred their meat charred versus rare, which human businessmen needed extra napkins for their sweaty palms. Every interaction followed strict post-war protocols. No direct eye contact with dragon nobility. No lingering near military officials from either species. Her mother's medical bills formed a thick stack on the small kitchen table back home. Each credit chip Sophia earned meant another day of experimental treatments, another week of hoping the new medication would work this time. She took extra shifts during dragon business hours, knowing their tips ran larger even if their demands ran hotter. The war's shadow lingered in every interaction. Human servers tense around dragon claws, dragon patrons subtly testing human obedience through unreasonable requests. Sophia's nursing knowledge became a private burden. She noticed the slight tremble in an elder dragon's wing, recognized the signs of fusion fatigue in hybrid diplomats, but kept her observations to herself. Her uniform served as both shield and cage, protecting her from questions about her qualifications while preventing her from using them. She calculated medication costs against serving tips while polishing glasses, measured treatment timelines against shift rotations during her breaks. The restaurant's main screen flashed orders in 3 languages, but Sophia always watched the dragon patrons closest. She saw how they held their bodies slightly angled away from humans, how their nostrils flared at human scents. She noticed which dragons left generous tips despite protocol breaches, which ones deliberately tested service boundaries. These observations became her private study of interspecies dynamics, conducted while carrying heavy trays through the crowded dining room. Her mother's deteriorating condition added urgency to every interaction. Sophia calculated that 17 more generous tips would cover the next treatment cycle. 32 would pay for the specialist consultation. She memorized which tables offered the best returns: dragon traders from the outer systems, human contractors working dragon construction projects. She developed precise strategies for each table type, adjusting her approach based on species and apparent status. This careful existence required constant vigilance. Sophia measured her words, controlled her expressions, and monitored her body language around all patrons. She became expert at appearing attentive without being intrusive, helpful without being familiar. The restaurant's neutral ground demanded perfect balance. Too human and she risked offending dragon sensibilities. Too clinical and she lost human tips. She navigated these tensions with the skill of someone who understood both worlds intimately, yet belonged to neither completely. The weight of her circumstances pressed down during quiet moments between rushes. She'd lean against the service station, watching dragons use their precise claws to handle human cutlery, observing humans trying not to stare at imperial guards. In these pauses, she felt the ghost of her nursing career like an ache, the certainty of diagnosis, the satisfaction of healing, the clarity of purpose that service work never provided. This was the world Sophia inhabited, a place of calculated exchanges and careful distances, where every action served immediate survival rather than larger purpose. She moved through her days with pragmatic efficiency, her dreams compartmentalized alongside her unused skills. The restaurant's chaos became background noise to her private calculations, the clatter of dishes mixing with mental tallying of medical debts. Yet within this constrained existence lay dormant potential. Her nursing instincts remained sharp beneath the service persona, her observational skills honed by necessity rather than choice. The very neutrality she maintained between species, gave her unique perspective on their interactions and needs. These qualities waited for the right moment, the right catalyst, to transform from survival mechanisms into something more significant. The Emperor's arrival sent ripples through the dining room long before the hostess announced his table. Theron Goldwing moved through the space with imperial grace, but his eyes betrayed a tension no protocol could mask. He carried his hatchling in a custom anti-gravity harness, the device humming faintly as it supported Orion's underdeveloped wings. The intricate metal framework contrasted sharply with the restaurant's simple decor, a visible declaration of both technological superiority and vulnerability. Dragon etiquette demanded royal hatchlings remain within secured compounds until their first successful shift. Theron's presence here, in a human-dominated establishment, constituted multiple breaches of tradition. His guards formed a tight perimeter around the table, their armored scales reflecting the dim lighting. Their watchful eyes scanned not just human patrons but dragon businessmen who might report this transgression to the conservative factions back home. Orion's harness featured diagnostic panels that glowed with soft amber light. The Emperor adjusted the support settings with careful claws, his attention entirely on the hatchling's comfort. This public display of disability went against dragon cultural norms that valued physical perfection and strength. Other dragon patrons averted their gaze, some from respect, others from discomfort at seeing imperial weakness openly displayed. Whispers traveled through the dining room in 2 languages. Human servers exchanged startled glances while dragon businessmen murmured behind raised menus. The risk calculations were obvious, exposing the heir apparent to human contact, revealing physical limitations to potential rivals, breaking generations of tradition for a simple meal. The Emperor's political opponents would seize upon this moment as evidence of unstable judgment. Theron's body language spoke of exhaustion rather than imperial confidence. He held Orion with the weary familiarity of a parent who had spent countless hours adjusting supports and monitoring readings. His movements lacked the ceremonial precision expected of dragon royalty, replaced by practical adjustments to straps and sensors. The usual imperial distance had collapsed into simple parenting in a very public space. This violation of protocol created immediate tension that affected everyone in the restaurant. Servers hesitated to approach the table, uncertain how to address an emperor in such an informal setting. Dragon patrons maintained careful neutrality, their business conversations faltering as they monitored the unprecedented situation. The entire dining room became a stage for a performance nobody had rehearsed. The decision stemmed from exhausted options. Imperial physicians had reached the limits of their knowledge regarding Orion's condition. Traditional dragon medicine emphasized strength-building exercises that only worsened the hatchling's discomfort. Theron had watched his son struggle through painful therapies that produced minimal improvement. This public outing represented a desperate parent's attempt at normalcy when specialized care had failed. His choice also reflected political calculation. By bringing Orion to a neutral human space, Theron avoided the judgmental scrutiny of dragon high society. Here, among species still negotiating post-war boundaries, different rules might apply. The restaurant's enforced neutrality offered temporary shelter from imperial expectations and conservative disapproval. He sought not just a meal but a different perspective. The Emperor's unorthodox decision created the precise conditions for unexpected connection. By stepping outside protocol and tradition, he opened space for something new to emerge. This calculated risk would soon collide with Sophia's own constrained circumstances, producing the spark that ignited their transformative relationship. The collision point approached as Sophia received the order for Table 7. The harness lights flickered as Orion shifted uncomfortably. Sophia saw the instability before her conscious mind registered the imperial protocol she was breaking. Her hands moved automatically, one supporting the hatchling's lower spine while the other adjusted the primary support strap. The motion came from muscle memory developed during nursing rotations with pediatric patients. She applied gentle counter-pressure exactly where the weight distribution seemed uneven. Across the dining room, other servers froze mid-motion. Their training emphasized maintaining 3 paces from dragon nobility, unless specifically summoned. Human hands never touched royal scales without explicit permission. Dragon businessmen at nearby tables recoiled visibly, their own claws tightening around drinking vessels. One elder dragon dropped his menu. the laminated pages scattering across the floor. Sophia's focus remained entirely on the hatchling's comfort. She noticed how the harness's gravity field pulsed erratically near the wing joints. Her fingers found the calibration node instinctively, adjusting the settings with a precision that surprised even her. The motion felt natural after years of adjusting medical equipment for her mother's care. She recognized the telltale signs of discomfort in the way Orion's scales rippled along his back. Her question cut through the tense silence. "Is he comfortable?" The words ignored centuries of protocol about addressing dragon royalty. She spoke not to the emperor but to the parent, her tone matching what she'd use with any caregiver concerned about their child. The simplicity of the question stripped away imperial ceremony, reducing the moment to its essential human and dragon element. The emperor's guards moved forward but stopped at Theron's slightest gesture. For a long moment the only sound was the harness's recalibrating hum, as Sophia's adjustments took effect. Orion's breathing eased, the strained whistle in his respiration softening to a smoother rhythm. The hatchling's head lifted slightly, his eyes focusing on Sophia with newfound clarity. Theron watched Sophia's hands work. He saw no calculation in her movements, no political agenda behind her actions. Her touch remained clinical yet gentle, professional yet personal. She checked the harness connections with efficient motions, her attention never wavering from the technical problem before her. The Emperor had spent years watching physicians approach Orion with either excessive reverence or clinical detachment. This combination of practical skill and genuine concern was entirely new. Dragon patrons exchanged stunned glances. They had expected the human to be removed immediately, possibly arrested for violating interspecies contact protocols. Instead, they witnessed Imperial guards stepping back rather than intervening. The Emperor's body language shifted from defensive tension to curious observation. His claws, which had been gripping the table edge, relaxed their pressure. Sophia completed her adjustments and stepped back, her server's training reasserting itself. She maintained the proper distance now that the immediate need had passed. But the moment had already cracked something open. The Emperor's eyes held not anger but dawning recognition. He saw past species divisions to the universal language of caregiving. His response, when it came, would acknowledge this fundamental shift in perception. The dining room remained silent as Sophia took their drink order with the same efficient professionalism she showed all patrons. But everything had changed in those few seconds of instinctual response. The Emperor watched her write on her tablet, his earlier tension replaced by thoughtful contemplation. Orion settled more comfortably in his harness, the improved support allowing him to observe his surroundings with greater ease. The kitchen had prepared the standard dragon fare, thick cuts of spiced meat seared at extreme temperatures. Sophia saw the dish arrive and immediately recognized the problem. The heavily seasoned meat would require vigorous chewing that Orion's underdeveloped jaw muscles couldn't manage. The rich spices might irritate his sensitive digestive system. She observed how the hatchling's nostrils flared at the strong aroma, his head pulling back slightly from the overwhelming scent. Sophia hesitated only a moment before speaking. She addressed the Emperor with careful respect but directness. The kitchen could prepare something easier for him to manage. Her suggestion hung in the air, violating every service protocol about questioning imperial orders. The head chef would have her position for challenging a prepared meal for dragon royalty. Cultural norms dictated accepting whatever was served without comment, she explained without condescension. Softer textures would require less effort to swallow. Milder flavors might be more comfortable for his system. Her knowledge came from medical training, not restaurant experience. She described how certain food preparations could reduce strain on underdeveloped muscles. Her words remained technical yet accessible, focusing on practical solutions rather than criticism of the original order. The kitchen staff resisted when she delivered the modified order. The head chef glared through the service window, his face flushed with anger. "We don't alter imperial requests," he snapped, his voice low but sharp. The other servers watched from a distance, their expressions mixing curiosity and concern. They knew the risk Sophia was taking by challenging established procedures. Sophia stood her ground with quiet authority. She explained the reasoning again, her voice steady despite the tension in the kitchen. She bridged her dual roles, server following orders and caregiver recognizing need. Her certainty came from watching Orion's reactions, from understanding how physical limitations affected basic functions. She didn't argue with the chef, but simply repeated the request with calm persistence. The revised meal arrived minutes later, steamed proteins with gentle herbs, finely chopped vegetables cooked to softness, a broth-based sauce instead of heavy spices. The presentation remained elegant despite the simpler preparation. Sophia placed the dishes before Orion, watching his reaction closely. The hatchling leaned forward, his breathing easier without the strong aromas. Theron observed his son's response. Orion took the first bite without hesitation, his swallowing motions smooth and unlabored. He continued eating with steady interest rather than the reluctant picking at food Theron had come to expect. The Emperor watched the hatchling consume more in 5 minutes than he typically ate in an entire meal. The simple act of comfortable eating became a profound moment of relief. This successful meal demonstrated the value of cross-species knowledge in practical terms. Human understanding of digestive comfort, combined with dragon culinary traditions to create something new. The Emperor saw that different approaches didn't mean inferior ones. His son's comfort became the most convincing argument for considering alternative perspectives. The kitchen staff watched through the service window, their earlier resistance fading as they saw the results. The head chef's angry expression softened to thoughtful observation. He noted how the hatchling ate without struggle, how the Emperor's tension visibly decreased. The meal became more than nourishment. It became a quiet revolution in how species could collaborate on practical solutions. Theron's guarded expression gave way to something resembling hope. He watched Sophia with new appreciation, recognizing that her intervention came from expertise rather than presumption. The successful meal created a bridge between their worlds, built on the practical foundation of a child eating comfortably. This simple act would lead to more significant conversations about care and collaboration. Orion's frustration mounted as his small claws slipped again from the table's edge. Sophia saw his distress building, the tightness around his eyes, the unhappy tremor in his underdeveloped wings. She reached for her server's tablet, activating the holographic menu projector. The device hummed softly as she adjusted the settings, bypassing the food imagery to access the storytelling function rarely used by restaurant staff. She selected the Arthurian Legends database, choosing Sir Galahad specifically. But she modified the traditional narrative, stripping away the battle sequences and quests for glory. Instead, she framed the knight as an explorer who discovered wonders through friendship and curiosity. The holographic figure that materialized above the table stood not with drawn sword but with extended hand, its light form shimmering in the dining room's atmosphere. Cultural boundaries hovered unspoken in the air. Dragon tradition valued their own heroic tales of aerial combat and fiery conquests. Introducing human mythology to the imperial heir could be interpreted as cultural imposition or even disrespect. Theron's guards shifted uneasily as the human knight figure took shape, their hands moving closer to weapon handles. Dragon patrons at nearby tables paused their meals to watch this unprecedented interaction. Sophie narrated softly as the hologram moved. "He travels to learn how others live," she explained, making the knight point toward imaginary landscapes. "He discovers how mountain streams create canyons over centuries." She focused on natural wonders and cooperative adventures, eliminating any elements that might emphasize physical prowess Orion couldn't achieve. The knight became a guide rather than a warrior, his journeys about discovery rather than domination. Orion's attention locked onto the shimmering figure. His physical discomfort seemed to fade as his eyes tracked the knight's movements. The hatchling's head tilted in curiosity as the hologram demonstrated how sedimentary layers formed in cliffs, how certain rocks glowed under moonlight. For the first time, his focus wasn't on what his body couldn't do, but on what his mind could imagine. The tension drained from his small frame, replaced by genuine engagement. Theron observed this transformation with dawning comprehension. He had never seen Orion so captivated, so free from the frustration that usually accompanied his physical limitations. The Emperor realized his approaches had been wrong. They had focused on overcoming weakness rather than nurturing strength. Sophia's simple story time revealed capacities his son possessed that traditional dragon education had neglected. The holographic display served multiple purposes simultaneously. It distracted Orion from discomfort, engaged his cognitive abilities, and provided diagnostic information. Sophia noted how his eyes tracked movement, how he responded to different narrative elements, which concepts held his attention longest. These observations offered more useful data about his capabilities than any medical scan had provided. This moment fundamentally shifted Theron's perception of his son. He saw not a fragile patient requiring constant protection, but an intelligent being hungry for stimulation. The Emperor recognized that Orion's mind remained untouched by his physical limitations, his curiosity waiting for the right key to unlock it. The simple hologram revealed potential where Theron had seen only deficit. The knight's adventures continued, now incorporating elements from dragon mythology at Sophia's subtle direction. She blended human and dragon folklore seamlessly, creating a hybrid narrative that respected both traditions. The blending itself became another bridge between their cultures, demonstrating that stories could share common values despite different origins. Orion watched, completely absorbed, his earlier frustration forgotten in the joy of discovery. Theron's expression softened into something resembling wonder. He saw his son not as broken but as different, not as limited but as waiting for the right opportunities. This revelation would reshape his approach to Orion's care and education, moving away from correction and toward cultivation. The holographic knight faded as Sophia ended the story, but its impact lingered in the new understanding between father and son. The meal concluded with Orion peacefully asleep in his harness, his breathing even and his scales relaxed. Theron rose from his chair, his movements quiet to avoid disturbing the hatchling. He extended a credit chip toward Sophia, the surface shimmering with draconite encryption patterns that indicated an Imperial-level transaction. The amount displayed, 1,000 credits, represented more than 3 months of her mother's medications. It was the largest tip in the restaurant's history, enough to temporarily ease her financial burdens. Sophia looked at the chip but made no move to take it. Her hands remained at her sides as she met the Emperor's gaze. "I'm not being kind to you for money," she said, her voice steady despite the staggering sum offered. "I'm being kind because Orion deserves kindness." She explained that accepting such payment wouldn't feel right, that her actions came from genuine care rather than financial motivation. Her refusal established clear ethical boundaries despite her desperate need for funds. The Emperor studied her for a long moment, his golden eyes reflecting the dining room's soft lighting. He retracted the credit chip and produced a different device, an unmarked communication chip of brushed silver. This object carried no visible value designation, only a single access code etched into its surface. He described it as her private communication channel to him, a direct line that bypassed all Imperial protocols and security screens. This offering carried far greater significance than the monetary tip. The communication chip represented a breach of standard security procedures that would alarm his advisors. Providing direct access to a human, particularly one outside official channels, violated decades of established protocol regarding interspecies contact. Theron's guards exchanged concerned glances but remained silent at their Emperor's clear decision. Sophia recognized the weight of what was being offered. This wasn't payment for services rendered, but an invitation to continued connection. The chip symbolized trust that transcended professional courtesy, acknowledging that their interaction had moved beyond server and patron. She accepted it carefully, her fingers closing around the cool metal surface. The object felt simultaneously insignificant and enormously consequential in her palm. The real currency exchanged in that moment wasn't credits, but possibility. Theron's insistence on providing the chip revealed his desperation for ongoing contact regarding Orion's care. He had found someone who saw his son not as a disabled heir, but as a child needing specific support. Sophia's refusal of excessive payment demonstrated she approached this relationship with integrity rather than opportunism. This transaction would launch her into realities she could scarcely imagine. The communication chip represented a bridge between her constrained world of medical bills and restaurant shifts, and the expansive realm of Imperial politics and dragon society. It offered not financial relief but something potentially more valuable, the chance to use her neglected skills in meaningful ways. The Emperor departed with his sleeping hatchling, leaving Sophia holding the small silver chip. She slipped it into her server's apron pocket, where it rested alongside order tablets and cleaning cloths. The ordinary objects surrounding it made the chip's significance even more striking. She returned to her duties, but everything had shifted. The weight of future possibilities now accompanied her through the dining room. The Imperial shuttle arrived precisely at midday, every day for 3 weeks. Theron and Orion always requested Sophia's section, always took the same table near the service entrance. The restaurant staff watched this pattern develop with growing curiosity and suspicion. Human servers speculated about Imperial motives, while Dragon Kitchen staff muttered about inappropriate familiarity. The manager tracked Sophia's shifts with increased vigilance, concerned about protocol breaches that might endanger their neutral status. Their conversations began with service formalities, meal preferences, drink refills, standard courtesies. Gradually, the exchanges expanded to include observations about Orion's progress. Sophia might mention she'd noticed his grip strengthening, his head control improving. Theron would share small victories from their morning exercises. These snippets of information built a foundation of shared investment in the hatchling's well-being, creating common ground across species and status divides. Personal revelations emerged during quiet moments between meal services. Sophia learned about the wartime poisoning that had damaged Orion's developing system, about the assassination that had taken Theron's mate. The Emperor spoke of these losses with the careful control of someone accustomed to concealing vulnerability. He described the limitations of traditional dragon medicine, the frustration of watching his son struggle through ineffective treatments. In return, Sophia shared her own story. She spoke of nursing school interrupted by her mother's diagnosis, of medical bills that demanded restaurant work instead of hospital shifts. She described the constant calculation between shifts worked and treatments funded, the quiet grief of watching her skills atrophy while her mother's condition worsened. These exchanges created mutual understanding of their respective burdens and limitations. Each meal became collaborative rather than transactional. Sophia might adjust Orion's seating position while Theron modified his harness settings. They discussed which foods produced the best results, which textures caused the least difficulty. Sophia brought small items from home, a textured cloth for sensory stimulation, a soft brush for scale care. Theron provided feedback on what seemed to help most, creating a feedback loop of practical problem-solving. Trust built through consistent action rather than declaration. Sophia's reliable presence, her attentive observations, her refusal to accept excessive payment. These demonstrated her character more convincingly than any promise. Theron's daily return, his willingness to listen to human medical suggestions, his respect for her boundaries. These actions spoke of genuine trust developing across cultural divides. The restaurant's neutral space allowed this relationship to develop outside normal power dynamics. Here, Theron was simply a parent seeking help for his child rather than an emperor commanding subjects. Sophia was a caregiver offering expertise rather than a server fulfilling orders. The established protocols of interspecies courtesy provided just enough structure to make the unprecedented connection possible without collapsing under its weight. By the 3rd week, their interactions had transformed completely. Sophia no longer approached the table with server's posture, but with caregiver's readiness. Theron no longer maintained imperial distance but engaged in direct consultation. Orion responded to their collaborative efforts with visible improvement. Better eating, increased engagement, reduced frustration. The hatchlings' progress became the most convincing. Argument for continuing their unconventional partnership, the restaurant. Staff's initial suspicion gradually gave way to acceptance as they observed the consistent professionalism of these interactions. They saw that Sophia maintained appropriate boundaries even as the relationship deepened. They witnessed Theron's respect for her expertise and her refusal to exploit the situation. The unusual arrangement began to feel less like a breach and more like a new pattern being established. These 3 weeks created a foundation that would support far greater changes. The trust built over measured conversations and practical care would soon be tested in much more challenging circumstances. The restaurant had served as incubator for a connection that would eventually transform not just 3 lives, but the relationship between 2 species. The dinner rush had ended. The last human traders departed. The final dragon executives escorted to their shuttles. Sophia was wiping down the service station when the Emperor approached alone for the first time. Orion remained at the residence, his absence making the moment feel unusually formal. Theron's movements carried the weight of deliberate decision rather than casual conversation. He stood before her, imperial robes seeming out of place among the stacked chairs and cleaning supplies. His offer came in measured phrases, each word carefully chosen. Full-time caregiving position for Orion, complete funding for her nursing degree, full medical coverage for her mother's treatments. The three components formed a comprehensive solution to every problem that had defined her life until now. The political implications hung unspoken between them. Employing a human as primary caregiver to the imperial heir shattered generations of protocol. Dragon traditionalists would see it as contamination of royal development. Security advisors would question the risk of human influence on the future emperor. The offer acknowledged the storm it would create while insisting the potential benefits outweighed the political consequences. Sophia's practical nature calculated the numbers instantly. The nursing degree represented her abandoned dreams suddenly restored. The medical coverage meant her mother could receive treatments without constant financial calculation. The caregiving position utilized skills she had thought permanently unused. Yet accepting meant leaving everything familiar for a world of unknown dangers and expectations. Theron framed it not as charity but strategic investment. He needed her specific capabilities as much as she needed the opportunity. Orion responded to her care in ways he never had with dragon physicians. Her human perspective offered solutions their traditions had overlooked. This reframing allowed Sophia to consider acceptance without feeling indebted. She would provide value equal to what she received. Her mind raced through practical considerations. Leaving the restaurant meant abandoning her only secure income source. Entering imperial service meant navigating political complexities she barely understood. Yet refusing meant continuing the exhausting balance between medical bills and serving shifts, watching her skills remain unused while her mother's condition possibly worsened. The Emperor waited silently, allowing her to process the magnitude of the decision. His patience itself signaled respect for the choice's difficulty. He had not presented this as a command but as an offer requiring mutual agreement. This approach acknowledged her autonomy, despite the power imbalance between them. Sophia looked around the restaurant that had been her whole world. The worn countertops, the familiar scent of cleaning solution and alien spices, the predictable rhythm of shifts and tips. Then she considered the alternative. Using her nursing skills, securing her mother's care, helping a child who had already shown remarkable progress under her attention. The offer's completeness made refusal increasingly difficult. It addressed not just immediate needs but future possibilities. The nursing degree would allow her to practice professionally once Orion required less care. The medical coverage would continue regardless of how long her mother needed treatment. The position itself represented work that utilized her fullest capabilities rather than limiting them. She understood this decision would redefine her identity completely. Server would become caregiver. Struggling daughter would become secured provider. Human outsider would become imperial insider. The transformation terrified her even as it offered everything she had been working toward through years of struggle. Theron's quiet observation gave her space to weigh the consequences. He had clearly considered every aspect of what this would mean for both of them. His offer demonstrated deep understanding of her situation and capabilities. This careful thoughtfulness made the proposal feel less like risk and more like opportunity. Sophia sat by her mother's bedside, the medical equipment humming its familiar rhythm. She described the Emperor's offer while adjusting the oxygen monitor, her words measured and practical. Her mother listened quietly, the war-era lung scarring making each breath a conscious effort. The room felt smaller than usual, the weight of decision pressing against the medical supplies lining the shelves. Leaving this bedside seemed impossible, despite the improved medical coverage. Sophia had arranged every medication bottle by frequency and dosage, memorized each alarm pattern on the monitors. Her mother's survival had depended on this careful attention to detail. Accepting the position meant trusting strangers with the most important responsibility of her life. The fear of something going wrong in her absence felt tangible in the sterile air. Her mother's hand reached out, the skin paper-thin over delicate bones. She spoke with the clarity that sometimes cut through her medication haze. "You know what you're going to do." The statement carried generations of wisdom in its simplicity. It acknowledged Sophia's practicality while recognizing the deeper calling she had suppressed. The words transformed the decision from abandonment to fulfillment. She saw the opportunity not as risk but as legacy. Her daughter's nursing skills, developed through years of unofficial practice at this bedside, could now find proper expression. The mother who had required constant care became the caregiver in this moment, offering the perspective only experience could provide. She recognized that true care meant sometimes stepping back to allow growth. This reframing changed everything. Sophia's practical nature had viewed the offer through logistics and risk assessment. Her mother helped her see it through purpose and potential. The position wasn't abandoning her care responsibilities but expanding their scope. Orion needed the same attentive observation her mother received, the same understanding of small discomforts and subtle improvements. The medical equipment continued its quiet symphony of beeps and whirs, but the room's energy had shifted. Sophia's mother smiled with understanding that transcended her illness. She had survived war to see her daughter thrive, not just struggle. Her encouragement carried the weight of hard-earned perspective about seizing opportunities when they appeared. Sophia realized her mother had been preparing her for this moment through years of observation. The careful monitoring of symptoms, the adjustment of treatments, the attention to small comforts, these were the same skills Orion required. Her nursing instincts hadn't atrophied but refined themselves through necessity. The restaurant had been an interruption, not a destination. The decision crystallized with her mother's blessing. What felt like risk became responsibility. What seemed like abandonment transformed into purposeful action. Sophia would care for Orion with the same dedication she showed her mother, just in a different setting. The skills honed in this small room would find application in imperial halls. Her mother's quiet confidence provided the final validation Sophia needed. The woman who depended on her care became the source of courage to expand that care to others. This moment completed a circle that began with Sophia's abandoned nursing dreams, connecting them to their unexpected fulfillment. The medical monitors continued their work, but the patient had become the guide, the caregiver ready to accept her calling. The imperial residence rose before her, its towering spires catching the morning light with precise brilliance. Sophia passed through security scanners that hummed with recognition of her pre-authorized status, the sound echoing in the cavernous entrance hall. Dragon guards watched her progress with impassive expressions, their armored scales reflecting the polished stone floors. Their eyes tracked her every movement, assessing the human who had breached their most secured spaces. Her assigned quarters revealed the gulf between her old life and new reality. The room spread larger than her entire apartment, furnished with artifacts that probably belonged in museums, a sleeping chamber with silk hangings, a study with data terminals, a bathing area with steaming mineral pools. The luxury felt overwhelming rather than comforting. She missed the familiar cracks in her apartment ceiling, the dependable hum of her mother's medical equipment, the neighborhood sounds that meant home. Every interaction with staff required navigation of unspoken rules. Dragon attendants spoke with careful formality, their claws clicking against stone floors as they delivered supplies. She noticed how they averted their eyes when addressing her, how their nostrils flared slightly at her human scent. Their movements conveyed generations of service to dragon nobility, making her human presence feel like disruption to established order. Small things communicated larger tensions, the slight hesitation before responding to requests, the extra scrutiny of her security clearances, the whispered conversations that ceased when she approached. The weight of imperial expectations settled heavily. In the restaurant, neutrality had protected her from political consequences. Here, every action carried potential implications for interspecies relations. She felt the constant awareness of being observed, evaluated, and likely criticized. The formal protocols governing speech, movement, and even mealtimes created a cage of expectations that her practical nature found increasingly restrictive. Sophia's focus on Orion became her anchor in this unfamiliar territory. She requested immediate access to his medical records, his daily routines, his care protocols. Engaging with practical needs felt more natural than navigating social complexities. She noted how his harness needed adjustment for sleeping positions, how certain foods affected his digestion, which toys held his attention longest. These tangible problems provided concrete solutions she could implement without political calculation. She approached staff interactions with the same practical focus. When requesting supplies for Orion's therapy sessions, she explained the purpose clearly. When suggesting schedule adjustments, she emphasized the benefits for the hatchling's development. Her decisions remained rooted in observable needs rather than personal preference, making them harder to dismiss as human interference. Gradually, small acceptances began to emerge. The head of household provided the specialized therapy tools Sophia requested without the usual delays. Kitchen staff began preparing the modified meals she recommended for Orion. These small victories represented quiet acknowledgement that her methods produced visible results. The staff's initial resistance slowly gave way to cautious cooperation, based on practical outcomes rather than theoretical objections. Sophia's consistency became her greatest asset. She maintained the same focused attention whether observers were present or not. Her dedication to Orion's needs remained unwavering through political tensions and staff skepticism. This steadfast commitment began earning reluctant respect from those who had initially dismissed her as temporary inconvenience. They saw that her priorities aligned with the hatchling's well-being, rather than personal advancement. Her approach transformed potential liabilities into strengths. The practical nature that seemed out of place in imperial circles became valuable when solving care challenges. Her human perspective offered solutions dragon traditions had overlooked. Her outsider status allowed her to question established practices without being constrained by tradition. These qualities, initially seen as deficiencies, gradually revealed their value through consistent application to Orion's care. Sophia unrolled the therapy mat in the sunlit conservatory, its human-made surface looking alien against the dragon-scale patterns of the floor. She began with basic stretches adapted from human physical therapy, modifying each movement for dragon physiology. The exercises required gentle pressure against underdeveloped wing joints, careful rotation of spinal segments, and graduated resistance for leg muscles. Each motion challenged traditional dragon values that emphasized natural strength and discouraged assistance. Dragon culture viewed physical struggle as character building, not something to be eased through external methods. She transformed the therapy into games to make it engaging. A wing extension became reaching for floating holographic butterflies. Spinal rotations turned into following light patterns across the wall. Resistance exercises mimicked pushing against imaginary currents in a stream. Orion responded to these playful approaches with noticeably better participation than the rigid drills dragon physicians had prescribed. His enjoyment became visible in the way his scales shimmered with interest rather than tensing with frustration. The grandmother observed from her carved observation chair, her ancient eyes missing nothing. She watched how Sophia adjusted each exercise based on Orion's daily energy levels, how she incorporated his interests into the movements, how she celebrated small improvements with genuine enthusiasm. The elder's initial skepticism gradually gave way to thoughtful observation. She noted the hatchling's increased flexibility, his improved balance, his brighter mood following sessions. These visible results challenged her assumptions about human methods. Even the most traditional staff members couldn't deny the changes they witnessed. Orion's mobility improved measurably. He could maintain sitting position longer, his wing control increased, his overall stability showed marked progress. His mood transformations were equally significant. The frustration that often clouded his interactions gave way to increased engagement and curiosity. Staff who had initially dismissed Sophia's methods found themselves adjusting their opinions based on these undeniable improvements. The therapy sessions became a form of quiet diplomacy conducted through daily routines. Each small victory, better grip strength, improved head control, successful completion of a new movement, built a case for cross-species collaboration. The practical results spoke louder than political arguments, demonstrating that different approaches could produce benefits where traditional methods had failed. This evidence-based progress slowly eroded resistance among the household staff. Sophia remained focused on Orion's needs rather than political implications. Her adjustments to therapy routines came from observation and medical knowledge, not attempts to prove points. She documented progress meticulously, noting which techniques produced the best results, which adaptations worked best for dragon anatomy, how to balance challenge with achievable goals. This data-driven approach made her methods harder to dismiss as merely human interference. The cumulative effect of these daily sessions began shifting perceptions throughout the household. Staff who had avoided Sophia started asking questions about the therapies. Dragon attendants observed her techniques with professional interest rather than suspicion. The grandmother occasionally suggested incorporating specific dragon traditional movements into the routines, creating a blend of methods that respected both cultures. This collaboration represented a significant breakthrough in acceptance. Healing became an unconscious political platform through its consistent success. Sophia's focus remained on Orion's well-being, but the implications extended far beyond the therapy mat. Each session demonstrated that cross-species knowledge exchange produced tangible benefits. Each improvement in the hatchling's condition argued for openness to different approaches. The therapy room became a laboratory for integration, where practical results gradually overcame generations of prejudice. The council chamber's great spherical form seemed to shrink around them as the 12 dragons took their positions. Scorchwing's scales gleamed with deliberate intensity as he initiated the challenge, his voice cutting through the formal atmosphere. He accused Theron of violating species separation protocols that had governed interspecies relations since the war's end. His words painted Sophia's presence as cultural contamination, a dangerous human influence on royal development that threatened dragon traditions. The Emperor stood firm before the council, his response measured but unwavering. He presented detailed records of Orion's progress, improved mobility metrics, better feeding patterns, cognitive development scores that surpassed all expectations. He described specific therapy techniques Sophia had introduced, explaining how they addressed limitations traditional dragon medicine had failed to resolve. His defense focused on practical results rather than political arguments, letting the evidence speak for itself. Orion's unexpected intervention changed everything. The young hatchling broke centuries of protocol by speaking directly to the council without permission. His voice held simple clarity as he stated, "Miss Sophia's not an enemy. She's my friend." The declaration cut through complex political arguments with childhood honesty. He described how her care felt different from previous treatments, how she understood his frustrations, how she made therapy feel like discovery rather than struggle. The grandmother's support provided crucial traditional backing. She spoke of watching Orion's transformation, of seeing his potential emerge through methods that initially seemed foreign. Her approval carried the weight of generations, balancing innovation with respect for dragon values. She emphasized that true strength included wisdom to accept help when needed, framing Sophia's care as enhancement rather than replacement of dragon traditions. The vote proceeded with visible tension among council members. Each raised claw represented not just opinion, but deep philosophical divides about their society's future. The 7-5 outcome established precarious legitimacy for Sophia's role, while revealing significant opposition that would require ongoing navigation. The narrow margin demonstrated how deeply traditionalists feared human influence despite evidence of benefits. This confrontation clarified the political stakes surrounding caregiving. Sophia's position became recognized officially, yet remained contested territory in broader cultural debates. The meeting transformed her role from private arrangement to public precedent, setting expectations and limitations that would shape future interspecies collaboration. Every therapy session, every recommendation, every interaction now carried additional weight beyond immediate care. The council's decision created formal recognition without eliminating underlying resistance. Sophia's methods now had imperial endorsement, but faced continued scrutiny from traditionalist factions. This tension would require careful balance between demonstrating results and respecting cultural boundaries. The victory established her right to continue care while acknowledging the ongoing political challenges that accompanied this unprecedented arrangement. The meeting's aftermath saw council members departing with clear divisions remaining. Supporters approached Theron with quiet congratulations while opponents maintained visible distance. These groupings revealed the deepening rift between progressive and traditionalist factions that would influence future policy decisions. Sophia's presence had become the focal point for larger debates about dragon society's direction. This confrontation transformed caregiving from personal service to political statement. Each of Sophia's actions now represented cross-species collaboration's potential success or failure. The measured approval gave her work legitimacy while maintaining pressure to demonstrate continuous positive results. The council's divided response ensured that every achievement would be celebrated by some and questioned by others, creating an environment where progress required both practical success and political navigation. The dish arrived precisely at noon, its presentation flawless like every imperial meal. Sophia's molecular scanner hummed as she performed her now routine check, a precaution the kitchen staff dismissed as human paranoia. The device's alert light flashed crimson, its readout identifying a neurotoxin designed to react with dragon stomach acid. The kitchen attendant who delivered the meal froze mid-bow, his scales paling to ash gray as the scanner's warning echoed in the quiet dining chamber. Theron's transformation happened instantly. His imperial form expanded to full dragon size, wings stretching across the chamber as a roar of pure fury tore from his throat. The sound vibrated through stone walls, shaking the foundations of the residence. Guards rushed in from all directions, claws extended and weapons drawn, creating chaos where moments before there had been orderly routine. His rage threatened to destroy the careful progress of months, to confirm every traditionalist fear about human influence disrupting dragon control. Sophia moved with calm precision through the turmoil. She isolated the contaminated dish using sterile containment fields, secured the scanner's data, and directed guards to detain the kitchen staff present during preparation. Her voice remained level as she coordinated the response, her nursing training overriding the panic surrounding her. She ensured evidence preservation while medics checked Orion, her actions methodical where others reacted emotionally. This technical response prevented the situation from escalating further. The investigation revealed the assassin was a mid-level kitchen supervisor, a dragon who had served the imperial household for decades. His interrogation exposed the deep anti-human sentiment still festering within palace staff. He stated during questioning, "The human won't always be there to protect him." His words revealing the attack was both practical strike and ideological statement. He believed Orion's disability undermined dragon perfection, viewing Sophia's care as contamination rather than compassion. The sophistication of the poison indicated advanced knowledge of dragon biochemistry and access to restricted substances. The toxin was engineered to mimic natural system failure, making the assassination appear as tragic medical complication rather than attack. This level of planning suggested broader conspiracy rather than lone extremism, revealing the extent of opposition to Theron's policies of integration. Sophia's vigilance proved her value extended far beyond caregiving. Her insistence on scanning protocols, initially seen as excessive human caution, became the critical factor in preventing tragedy. Her medical knowledge allowed her to recognize the specific biochemical markers of the poison where dragon security might have missed them. This crisis demonstrated how human and dragon strengths complemented each other perfectly when combined. The aftermath saw tightened security protocols and staff vetting procedures. Theron's fury gradually subsided into grim determination as he recognized the attack's political dimensions. The assassination attempt was intended to destabilize his rule and discredit cross-species collaboration. Instead, it solidified the bond between human caregiver and dragon rulers, transforming them from employer-employee to united front against common threats. Survival became their strongest argument for continued collaboration. The combined response, Theron's protective power, Sophia's technical skill, Orion's resilience, demonstrated their effectiveness as a team. The crisis forged their relationship into something stronger, moving beyond convenience into genuine partnership. They had faced mortality together and emerged with deeper understanding of their respective strengths and vulnerabilities. This event would linger in Palace, memory as turning point where theoretical risks became tangible threats. Sophia's position evolved from tolerated necessity to essential safeguard. The assassination attempt failed in its immediate goal, but succeeded in revealing the fragile nature of the peace they were building. It underscored that progress would face active opposition, not just passive resistance, from elements determined to maintain separation between species. The hatchling's question emerged during their evening story time, his head resting against Sophia's shoulder as she described human family traditions. Orion had been listening to tales of human parenting, his curious mind connecting the care he received with the concepts she described. His scales shifted with thoughtful colors as he processed these unfamiliar ideas about family structure and bonding. The quiet moment in his chambers felt far removed from imperial politics, creating space for personal rather than political considerations. Dragon reproduction traditions emphasized bloodline purity and biological inheritance above all else. Emotional bonding was considered secondary to genetic legacy, with hatchlings often raised by teams of specialized caregivers rather than individual parents. The concept of chosen family based on emotional connection represented a fundamental challenge to centuries of cultural practice. Orion's innocent question pushed against these deeply ingrained values without him understanding the implications. His words were simple and direct. "Will you be my mother?" The question addressed the emotional reality of their relationship rather than biological possibility. It recognized the nurturing care Sophia provided, the consistent presence, the attentive response to his needs. This reframing focused on what motherhood felt like, rather than how it was traditionally defined within dragon society. The request came from his experience of being cared for, rather than abstract concepts of family structure. Sophia's response focused on the essence of caregiving, rather than technical motherhood. She accepted by describing what she could provide: consistent presence, attentive care, emotional support. Her acceptance emphasized actions rather than titles, practical dedication rather than biological relationships. This approach allowed her to embrace the maternal role while respecting the cultural differences that made traditional motherhood impossible between their species. Theron observed this exchange with quiet understanding. His support for their evolving relationship signaled acceptance of hybrid family models for the Imperial future. He recognized that Orion's well-being depended on emotional security as much as physical care. His endorsement of this unconventional family structure demonstrated progressive thinking about what constituted family and how it might function in their changing society. This moment transformed their relationship from professional caregiving to genuine familial bonding. This redefinition of family challenged fundamental dragon traditions about inheritance and succession. If motherhood could be defined by action rather than birth, then lineage itself became more flexible than previously imagined. The implications for imperial succession were profound, suggesting that the qualities that made a good ruler might be nurtured rather than purely inherited. This shift in thinking would eventually influence how future leaders were prepared and evaluated. The moment transformed their daily interactions completely. Sophia's care became explicitly maternal rather than professionally clinical. She could now incorporate nurturing touches, emotional reassurance, and parental guidance into her caregiving without hesitation. Orion responded to this shift with increased emotional security, his anxiety levels decreasing noticeably as he felt more firmly anchored in relationship. Their bonding created a stable foundation for his continued development. This redefinition of motherhood based on action, rather than species or birth, would eventually transform imperial succession concepts. It suggested that leadership qualities could be cultivated through dedicated mentorship and emotional support, rather than relying solely on genetic inheritance. The family they created through choice rather than biology became a living example of how different models could succeed, where traditional approaches had limitations. Their unconventional family structure would gradually influence broader thinking about relationships across species lines and social hierarchies. The medical certification program's curriculum had been created specifically for her situation, with human nursing protocols adapted to dragon physiology. Each module required translating knowledge between species, learning how dragon scales indicated health status, understanding their unique respiratory systems, mastering the differences in metabolic processes. Sophia studied late into the night, her notes forming bridges between human medical textbooks and dragon anatomical charts. The challenge wasn't just learning new information, but creating connections where none existed before. Traditional dragon healers resisted her presence in their medical institutions. They viewed human intervention as unnecessary contamination of their established practices. During clinical rotations, senior physicians would watch her with critical eyes, questioning her methods despite visible results. They dismissed her adapted techniques as temporary measures rather than legitimate medical approaches. This resistance created constant tension between established tradition and innovative practice within healing halls. She became a living bridge between knowledge systems. Her human nursing background provided fresh perspectives on dragon pediatric care, while her practical experience with Orion gave her unique insights into application. She developed protocols that combined the best of both approaches: human precision in monitoring with dragon understanding of scale development, human therapeutic exercises adapted for wing muscles, dragon nutritional knowledge enhanced by human digestive science. These hybrid methods began showing consistent results that pure traditional approaches had failed to achieve. Graduation day arrived with Theron and Orion seated prominently in the audience. Their presence signaled imperial endorsement of her achievement, transforming the ceremony from academic milestone to political statement. When she received top honors, the applause came first from human attendees, then gradually from Dragon medical staff who had witnessed her work. The diploma represented not just personal accomplishment but formal recognition of cross-species medical collaboration. This certification provided technical legitimacy to care practices she had developed intuitively. The credential allowed her to publish research, train other practitioners, and influence medical policy. Her methods gained acceptance not because of political pressure, but because they produced measurable improvements in patient outcomes. Dragon medical institutions began incorporating her cross-species methodologies into standard training programs, creating permanent change in how healers approached pediatric care. Her transformation from anomaly to pioneer became complete with professional recognition. The certification moved her work beyond the political context of imperial favor into the realm of medical innovation. She could now contribute to Dragon healthcare systems as an equal rather than an exception. Her expertise valued for its practical benefits rather than tolerated as imperial whim. This shift allowed her influence to extend beyond Orion's care to broader improvements in pediatric medicine. The program's demanding nature had required mastering two medical philosophies simultaneously. She learned to diagnose conditions using both human technological tools and Dragon traditional observation methods. This dual perspective enabled her to identify issues that might be missed by practitioners trained in only one system. Her unique position as bridge between worlds became her greatest professional asset, allowing her to see solutions others overlooked. Her academic success demonstrated exceptional adaptation ability under challenging circumstances. Balancing imperial duties with rigorous study required precise time management and relentless focus. She approached medical training with the same practical determination that had characterized her restaurant work, but now applied to mastering complex physiological systems and treatment protocols. This consistent dedication earned respect even from initially skeptical instructors. The certification process itself became a model for future cross-species education. The adapted curriculum she helped develop would eventually train other practitioners working across species lines. Her graduation represented not just personal achievement, but the beginning of institutional change in medical education. The program's success proved that integrated training could produce practitioners capable of serving diverse populations effectively. Her expertise gained recognition beyond the political context that had initially created the opportunity. Medical conferences requested her presentations, research journals published her findings, and healing institutions sought her consultations. This professional acknowledgement validated her methods based on results rather than imperial connection, establishing her as a legitimate innovator in pediatric care rather than merely the Emperor's human caregiver. The transformation chambers. Lights cast long shadows across the polished floor as Orion stood waiting. His 7-year-old frame still required the subtle support of his harness, but his posture held new determination. Sophia adjusted the final settings on the monitoring equipment, her movements precise after years of this routine. Theron stood at observation position, his imperial composure barely containing the tension of this moment. Traditionalist council members had gathered under the pretext of official business, their presence a silent challenge to the hybrid methods they believed weakened Dragon nature. Orion began the shift sequence with focused intensity. The air shimmered around him as scales restructured, bones extended, wings unfolded. The process revealed its imperfections immediately. One forelimb developed slightly smaller. The back legs lacked full supportive strength. The wingspan showed asymmetrical development. These physical markers of his early challenges remained visible in the transformed state. The traditionalists watched with critical eyes, searching for evidence that cross-species care had diminished his dragon essence. The completed transformation stood before them, a young dragon bearing the marks of his difficult journey yet fully realized in form. Orion's pride shone through the physical imperfections. He turned his head to examine his own wings, his eyes reflecting wonder rather than disappointment at their asymmetry. This acceptance of progress over perfection became the most powerful argument against his critics. His focus remained on achievement rather than limitation, on what he had gained rather than what might be lacking. The silence in the chamber deepened as observers processed what they were witnessing. The traditionalists had expected either failure that would confirm their warnings or perfect transformation that would validate the methods. This middle ground, successful but imperfect, challenged their binary thinking about ability and disability. They saw that difference didn't mean deficiency, that adaptation could produce meaningful results even within limitations. Orion's obvious pride in his accomplishment made criticism seem small and mean-spirited. This physical breakthrough mirrored the societal transformations happening gradually outside the chamber. Just as Orion had integrated human and dragon approaches to achieve this moment, their society was slowly blending traditions to create new possibilities. The imperfect transformation became living proof that hybrid methods could produce real success without sacrificing essential identity. The visual evidence silenced arguments that disability precluded meaningful contribution. Here was the imperial heir, transformed through determination and adapted care. Sophia approached the young dragon, her human form small beside his scaled bulk. Orion lowered his head to her level, his breath warm against her face. Theron joined them, completing the picture of their unconventional family united across species lines. This image, human caregiver, dragon emperor, and transformed heir, became the lasting impression for all observers. It demonstrated that connection transcended physical form, that care mattered more than perfection, that family could be chosen rather than dictated by tradition alone. The moment converted skepticism into cautious optimism among many observers. Those who had doubted now saw possibilities where they had previously seen only problems. The physical evidence of Orion's achievement provided tangible support for integrated approaches to challenges. This transformation would become reference point in future debates about interspecies collaboration. Its success measured not by perfection, but by progress. The young dragon's pride in his accomplishment became the most convincing argument for continuing their innovative path forward. The great chamber's ancient stone seemed to absorb sound as Orion stepped forward, his 12-year-old frame still bearing the subtle markers of his early struggles. He moved with a hybrid grace that mirrored his unique perspective, part dragon heir, part student of human kindness. The council members watched from their elevated positions, their scaled faces impassive but their eyes tracking the young prince's every movement. This was the chamber where traditions were defended, not challenged, where dragon culture had been preserved through centuries of careful separation from human influence. Orion's proposal began with quiet certainty. He described integrated learning environments where dragon and human children would study together, combining teaching methods and curricula from both cultures. His words challenged educational practices that had remained unchanged for generations, practices designed to protect dragon identity through isolation. The air grew thick with unspoken resistance as traditionalist council members shifted in their seats, their claws tapping against stone armrests in rhythmic disapproval. The vision required complete reimagining of education. Classroom design would need to accommodate both species' physical needs: lower tables for human children, open spaces for young dragons' wing exercises. Curriculum development would blend dragon history with human sciences, creating hybrid knowledge systems rather than parallel ones. Conflict resolution methods would draw from both diplomatic traditions, finding common ground where previous approaches had emphasized separation. Every aspect demanded innovation rather than adaptation. Orion framed integration as cultural strength rather than compromise. His personal experience gave this argument credibility. He embodied the potential benefits of cross-species understanding. He spoke of learning from Sophia not as dilution of dragon identity, but as expansion of perspective. His transformation from fragile hatchling to confident heir demonstrated how different approaches could produce results where traditional methods had failed. This living evidence made abstract arguments concrete. The proposal received unexpected support from younger council members whose attitudes reflected changing times. Their generation had grown up in the war's aftermath, witnessing the limitations of separation. They saw integration not as threat but as opportunity, not as loss of tradition but as evolution of culture. Their backing provided crucial momentum, shifting the debate from whether to change to how to implement change effectively. This generational divide revealed broader shifts in dragon society's thinking about human relations. Education became the new frontier for species integration, moving beyond coexistence to active collaboration. The schools would shape future generations to value diversity rather than fear difference, to seek understanding rather than maintain distance. This approach recognized that true integration required foundational change rather than surface accommodation. By starting with children, they could build relationships before prejudices hardened into permanent barriers. Orion's closing statement summarized his vision with simple clarity. He described humans and dragons as never enemies but strangers who didn't know how to talk to each other. This reframing transformed the relationship from inherent conflict to missed connection. His personal experience gave weight to this perspective. He had benefited from cross-species care, had thrived through integrated approaches. The proposal represented his attempt to extend that benefit to others, to create systems that would prevent the misunderstandings that had previously led to violence. The council's debate that followed revealed deep divisions, but also new possibilities. Traditionalists emphasized cultural preservation, while progressives highlighted practical benefits. Orion's unique position as imperial heir, who had personally benefited from integration, gave his arguments particular force. His proposal wasn't theoretical, it was born from lived experience, from the demonstrated success of blending human and dragon approaches to solve complex problems. This educational initiative represented the logical extension of years of gradual integration, the success of cross-species medical collaboration, the proven benefits of shared therapeutic practices, the demonstrated value of different perspectives, all pointed toward the potential of integrated education. The schools would institutionalize the lessons learned through personal relationships, creating systems that would outlive individual efforts. This systematic approach promised more sustainable integration than previous ad hoc arrangements. The vote's outcome would determine whether their society moved toward greater connection or retreated to familiar separation. Either way, Orion's proposal had already shifted the conversation. He had framed education not as preservation of the past but as investment in the future, not as protection from change but as preparation for it. This reimagining of learning's purpose would influence their society regardless of the immediate decision. 5 years revealed the scale of change that began with one instinctual gesture. Sophia's influence now extended from the imperial nursery to policy chambers where decisions shaped two species' futures. She moved through palace corridors with the same practical attention that had characterized her restaurant service. Her caregiver's instincts now applied to broader social healing. Her care model became the blueprint for interspecies cooperation across multiple fields. Its success demonstrated through measurable improvements in health, education, and diplomatic relations. Some dragon factions still resisted human influence in imperial affairs, their opposition rooted in centuries of separation and conflict. Traditionalists questioned the integration schools, criticized cross-species medical practices, and warned against diluting dragon cultural identity. Their resistance created constant tension that required careful navigation, reminding everyone that progress remained fragile and contested. This opposition ensured that every advancement had to prove its value repeatedly against skeptical scrutiny. The family's personal happiness became the most convincing argument for integration's success. Theron, Sophia, and Orion presented a living example of cross-species family functioning effectively, their bond transcending biological and cultural differences. Their mutual respect and affection demonstrated that connection could flourish across traditional boundaries. This visible evidence of successful integration influenced public opinion more effectively than political speeches or policy documents ever could. Children of both species grew up with normalized interaction rather than suspicion. Integration schools became spaces where difference was celebrated rather than feared, where dragon scales and human skin were simply variations rather than divisions. These children learned each other's histories without the weight of past conflicts, their friendships forming natural bridges between communities. This generation would inherit a world where cooperation was the expected norm rather than the remarkable exception. The original restaurant became a historical landmark where change began. A simple plaque marked the table where Sophia had first stabilized Orion's harness, the spot where two species' futures had unexpectedly intertwined. Tourists from both human and dragon communities visited the site, their presence acknowledging the significance of that initial connection. The restaurant continued operating, its neutral space now symbolizing possibility rather than mere coexistence. Sophia's practical empathy proved more transformative than any political doctrine. Her ability to understand Orion's needs and respond with effective care demonstrated the power of individual compassion to drive large-scale change. She approached policy decisions with the same attention to practical outcomes that had characterized her caregiving, ensuring that integration efforts remained grounded in real benefits rather than abstract ideals. This consistent focus on tangible improvements built trust across species lines. Small acts of care had created larger change than grand diplomatic gestures. The specially prepared meal, the stabilizing hand, the holographic story. These simple actions had achieved what formal treaties and negotiations had failed to accomplish. They had built trust through demonstrated care rather than promised benefits, creating foundations strong enough to support broader social transformation. This pattern repeated across integrated institutions, where practical cooperation gradually overcame historical prejudices. The waitress became empress without losing her caregiver identity. Sophia's position transformed dramatically, but her essential approach remained consistent. She still checked harness fittings herself, still observed meal protocols, still prioritized practical solutions over ceremonial formalities. Her leadership style reflected her origins: attention to detail, focus on outcomes, and consistent care for those depending on her. This continuity between her past and present selves made her influence genuinely transformative, rather than merely symbolic. Her legacy demonstrated that individual kindness could reshape worlds. The integration schools, the medical collaborations, the normalized relations, all flowed from that initial decision to respond to need rather than follow protocol. This proved that profound change could begin with simple actions, that the future sometimes revealed itself through small moments of connection rather than grand designs. The restaurant's plaque carried only the date and a simple description, allowing the power of the story to speak for itself. The restaurant,